As the new year approaches, the world grows quiet in a different way. It is a moment when people pause, reflect, and offer prayers for those who did not make it into the days ahead on some days. History exhales softly, not with headlines that shout, but with names that linger gently in memory. Today is one of those moments, as 2025 arrives. We remember the lives lost along the way, lives that shaped laughter, sound, rebellion, and human connection, for individuals, each walking a different path, left behind work that continues to speak long after their voices have fallen silent. Some stood in the spotlight, others worked quietly in the background. All left something meaningful behind. This is not only a story of loss, but of gratitude. A moment to pause, to reflect, and to honor the presence they gave to the world. Tonight, we remember for lives that helped define their time, and we hold them gently as the year turns forward. The news arrived quietly, the way it often does when a familiar voice leaves the world without warning. On December 22, 2025, Patrick Cassidy Finn passed away, closing the final chapter of a life spent bringing warmth, humor, and steady presence to American television. There was no spectacle around the announcement, no loud headlines, just a name many recognized, and a sudden pause where his work once lived. Born on July 31, 1965, Finn grew up with a natural pull toward performance. He was never the kind of actor who chased the spotlight. Instead, he learned the craft from the ground up, studying comedy and timing with patience and discipline. That path led him to Chicago's legendary Second City, a place known for shaping performers who understood both humor and humanity. There, among long nights of rehearsals and live audiences, Finn found his voice. Second City taught him more than jokes. It taught him how to listen, how to react, and how to make others shine. Those skills would become the foundation of his career. Colleagues from that time often remembered him as steady and generous, someone who cared about the rhythm of a scene more than personal attention. One former castmate later recalled Patrick never tried to steal a moment. He made moments better, just by being there. His first major break came in the mid-1990s with The George Wendt Show, where he played Dan Coleman. The sitcom had a short run, but Finn's performance stood out for its grounded charm. He brought authenticity to a format that often leaned toward exaggeration. Viewers may not have known his name yet, but they recognized his face. He felt familiar, like someone they had met before. That sense of familiarity became his signature. Soon after, Finn joined Murphy Brown in a recurring role as Phil Jr., appearing during the show's later seasons. The series was already a cultural institution, and stepping into its world was no small task, yet Finn fit naturally into the ensemble. His performance was subtle, respectful of the show's tone, and quietly confident. He didn't demand attention. He earned it. Throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s. Finn continued to build a career that many actors quietly admire. He worked steadily, moved easily between television and film, and brought consistency to every role. On the NBC series Ed, he played Jim Frost, a character grounded in everyday life. The role suited him well. He had a way of making ordinary people feel real, layered, and worth watching. At the same time, Finn appeared in several popular comedy films that defined an era. Movies like Dude, Where's My Car?, How High?, and I Love You, Beth Cooper were part of the cultural fabric of the early 2000s. While his roles were often supporting, they were memorable. He added texture to scenes, anchoring humor with sincerity. His performances helped stories feel lived in rather than staged. One Finn wrote, "Years later, I never knew his name growing up, but I knew his face. He was always there, making the movie better." It was a sentiment echoed by many after his passing. Finn was the kind of actor people recognized, without realizing how much he had shaped their viewing experience. Behind the scenes, he was known for professionalism and kindness. Directors appreciated his reliability. Cast members spoke of his calm presence on set. He arrived prepared, treated everyone with respect, and understood that acting was a collaborative effort. In an industry often driven by ego, Finn stood out for his humility. As the years went on, he continued working steadily, choosing roles that fit his style rather than chasing fame. He never reinvented himself for attention, and he never needed to. His strength lay in consistency. He represented a generation of character actors who carried television on their shoulders, without ever becoming household names. When news of his death spread in December 2025, the response was quiet but deeply felt. Tributes came from fellow actors, writers, and fans who had grown up watching him. One message read simply, "He made everything he wasn't feel real. That matters," another said. Patrick Finn was comfort TV before we even had a name for it. There was no single defining role that captured his entire career, and that, in many ways, was his legacy. He was present across decades of storytelling, a familiar face that made scenes feel honest. His work blended into the background of people's lives, playing during dinners, late nights, and quiet weekends. He became part of the rhythm of everyday viewing. In an industry that often celebrates extremes, Patrick Cassidy Finn represented balance. He showed that success could be measured in consistency, respect, and quiet impact. His career reminded audiences that not every legend stands at the center of the frame. Some stand just to the side, holding the story together. As the years move forward, his performances remain. They live on in reruns, streaming libraries, and the memories of viewers who felt comforted by his presence without always knowing why. His work continues to breathe life into scenes long after the camera stopped rolling. Patrick Cassidy Finn left the world the same way he lived in it, without noise, without spectacle, but with meaning. And in the long story of American television, his chapter remains a gentle, steady one, written with warmth, humility, and quiet grace. The news came quietly, carried through small headlines and soft messages shared online. Amos Poe had passed away in 2024 at the age of 76. There was no sudden shock, no loud announcement, just a slow realization settling in across the worlds he once captured on film. For many, his name brought back a feeling rather than a face. A feeling of raw sound, dimly lit rooms, restless youth, and a time when art was made without permission. Born in 1948, Amos Poe came of age during a period of cultural change. He was drawn not to polish or perfection, but to what felt real. In the 1970s, New York City was loud, messy, and alive with new ideas. Music, film, and identity were all being reshaped at once. Poe did not stand outside of this moment. He stepped directly into it, camera in hand, ready to document what others overlooked. His most well-known work, The Blank Generation, became more than a film. It became a record of a movement. Before the world knew what to call it, punk was not yet a brand or a style. It was a feeling of resistance, a push against tradition, and a desire to be heard. Poe understood this instinctively. He filmed not to explain, but to observe. He let people be themselves, loud or quiet, broken or bold, those who appeared in his films were not polished performers. They were musicians, artists, and outsiders carving out space for themselves. The camera did not judge them. It simply stayed with them. In doing so, Poe preserved moments that would later define an era of American counterculture. Without his work, much of that history might have faded into rumor or memory. One fellow filmmaker later said, Amos didn't chase trends. He stood still and let the truth walk past his lens. That quiet patience became his signature. While others sought fame or attention, Poe focused on honesty. His films were never about spectacle. They were about presence. As punk culture grew and spread, Poe remained grounded. He did not try to reshape his work to match commercial tastes. Instead, he continued to tell stories the way he always had, closely, carefully, and without polish. His films carried a rough texture that felt intentional. It reminded viewers that art did not need permission to exist. Through the years, his influence spread quietly. Younger filmmakers studied his work not for technique, but for courage. He showed that it was possible to document life as it happened without filters or explanation. Many later said his films gave them the confidence to pick up a camera and start recording their own worlds. Though he never sought fame, his name became deeply respected in independent film circles. He was seen as a mentor, even by those who never met him. His work taught that stories did not need large budgets or famous faces. They only needed truth. In later years, Poe remained connected to the creative world. Though he stepped further from the spotlight, he watched as the culture he once filmed became history. Punk, once raw and informed, had become studied and celebrated. Yet his work stood apart because it captured the moment before labels existed. When news of his death spread in 2024, tributes came from musicians, filmmakers, and fans across generations. Many shared clips from his films, remembering where they were the first time they saw them. One message read, "He showed us who we were before anyone told us who to be." Another said, "Amos Poe gave punk its memory." There was a sense of quiet gratitude in the responses. People did not speak of awards or fame. They spoke of feeling seen. They spoke of honesty. They spoke of a man who chose to observe rather than interrupt. His passing marked the end of a chapter, but not the end of his influence. His films remain, still breathing with the energy of the people he captured. They remind viewers of a time when art was raw and imperfect. And when that imperfection was the point, Amos Poe never tried to define a generation. He simply stood close enough to record it, and in doing so, he gave future generations a window into a moment that might have otherwise been lost. As his story comes to a close, what remains is not silence but motion. The echo of music in small clubs, the grain of film in low light, The feeling of something new being born, Amos Poe left behind more than footage. He left behind a way of seeing. And in that way, his voice continues to speak, quietly, honestly, and forever true to the world he loved enough to document. The news came softly, almost like a fading note at the end of a song. In 2024, it was confirmed that Bamonte had passed away. There was no loud announcement, no sudden rush of headlines, just a quiet moment of reflection that spread through the music world, especially among those who understood how deeply his work had shaped the sound of a generation. Born on June 9, 1960, Bamonte grew into music rather than chasing it. His path was not marked by early fame or public attention. Instead, it was shaped by patience, dedication, and a deep respect for sound. Long before he stood on stage as a member of The Cure, he worked behind the scenes, learning the craft, understanding the rhythm of live music, and absorbing the emotional language of the band. Bamonte began as part of the road crew, a role that often goes unnoticed but is vital to every performance. Night after night, he watched the mechanics of music unfold. He learned how sound filled a room, how light meant emotion, and how silence could be just as powerful as noise. Those years shaped his understanding of music as something lived, not performed. When he eventually became a full member of The Cure, it felt less like a promotion and more like a natural progression. He already understood the band's soul. His guitar work did not demand attention. Instead, it supported the atmosphere, adding depth and texture to songs that were already rich with feeling. His contributions were quiet, but they mattered. The Cure's music had always been about mood, space, and emotion. Bamonte fit seamlessly into that world. His sound blended into the shadows, strengthening the emotional weight of each performance. He did not play to impress, he played to serve the song. That approach became one of his greatest strengths. Fans often described his presence as calming. On stage, he was steady and focused, never drawing attention away from the music itself. Off stage, he was known as thoughtful and kind, someone who listened more than he spoke. A former bandmate once said, "Perry understood the silence between notes." That's where the feeling lived. Throughout the years, Bamonte remained dedicated to the craft rather than the spotlight. He did not seek interviews or personal fame. His work spoke for him. Those who followed The Cure closely could hear his influence in the layered arrangements and emotional depth of the band's sound during his time with them. As alternative music evolved, his contributions continued to resonate. Younger musicians often cited The Cure as an influence, sometimes without realizing that Bamonte's subtle touch helped shape the very sound they admired. His legacy lived quietly in chords, echoes, and atmosphere. When news of his passing spread, fans responded with reflection rather than shock. Social media filled with messages of gratitude and remembrance. One fan wrote, "He was never loud, but his music stayed with me for life." Another shared, "Bamonte helped create the feeling I turned to when words weren't enough." There was a shared understanding that something gentle had been lost. Not a star in the traditional sense, but a craftsman, someone who believed that music could be emotional without being overwhelming, powerful without being forceful. In the days following his death, many returned to old recordings. They listened more closely this time, picking up on the subtle guitar lines, the layered tones, the quiet strength in his playing. It became clear how much he had given without ever asking for recognition. Bamonte's life was a reminder that art does not always need to stand in front to matter. Sometimes it lives in the background, shaping feeling and memory in ways that last longer than fame. His work helped define an era of music that spoke to loneliness, hope, and reflection. As the world continues to move forward, his sound remains. It drifts through headphones late at night. It lingers in songs that still comfort listeners decades later. It lives in the spaces between words, where emotion often speaks the loudest. Bamonte may have walked quietly through life, but his music left a deep and lasting echo, and in that echo, he is still here, felt, remembered, and forever part of the sound that shapes so many lives. The news arrived in a quiet way, the kind that makes people pause before speaking. In 2024, it was confirmed that Michaela had passed away at the age of 35. The announcement spread slowly, carried by messages online, and short tributes filled with disbelief. For many, it felt unreal. Someone so full of life, so open, so present, was suddenly gone. Michaela was born in 1989, into a world that would later come to know her through a screen. But long before cameras followed her, she was known for her energy and warmth. Friends often described her as someone who filled a room without trying. She laughed easily, spoke honestly, and connected with people in a way that felt natural and unforced. Her public journey began when she appeared on Big Brother, a place where personalities are tested under constant watch. While many used the platform to perform, Mickey stood out for being real. She showed her emotions openly, She spoke her mind. She did not hide her struggles or her joy. That honesty made her relatable to viewers who saw pieces of themselves in her story. During her time on the show, she became known for her bright spirit and emotional openness. She was not perfect and she never tried to be. That, more than anything, made people care. One fan later wrote, "Mickey felt like someone you could sit with and talk to for hours. She was real in a way TV rarely shows when the camera stopped rolling." Her life continued beyond the screen. She stayed connected with those who supported her, often sharing moments of her life with honesty and humor. She spoke openly about growth, struggles, and learning to accept oneself. Her voice carried comfort for many who were going through their own quiet battles. Those close to her remember her as deeply caring. She checked in on people. She listened. She made space for others to be themselves. A friend once said, "Mickey had a way of making you feel seen, even on her hardest days." She cared about how others were doing. Her openness made an impact far beyond reality television. She represented a generation learning to live honestly in a public world. She reminded people that it was okay to be emotional, to be vulnerable, and to be imperfect. In a culture that often rewards polish, she chose truth. As time passed, her presence remained meaningful to many who followed her journey. Messages she shared, moments she lived, and conversations she sparked continued to resonate. She did not build her legacy through fame alone, but through connection. When news of her death broke in 2024, the reaction was filled with shock and sorrow. Tributes poured in from fans, friends, and those who had only known her through a screen. Many shared stories of how her honesty had helped them feel less alone. One message read, "Mickey taught me it was okay to be myself. I'll never forget that," another said. "She brought light into spaces that needed it most." Her passing at such a young age served as a painful reminder of how fragile life can be. It left many reflecting on the pressure placed on public figures, and on the importance of kindness in everyday life. Yet, even in grief, people chose to remember her for what she gave rather than what was lost. Michaela Lee's story was not defined by fame. It was defined by heart, by openness, by a willingness to show up as she was, even when it was hard. Her life reminded others that authenticity has power, and that being real can be a gift to those watching. In the days after her passing, many returned to her words, her laughter, and the moments she shared. They found comfort there. They found reminders to live honestly, to speak kindly, and to value connection over perfection. Mickey's life, though brief, carried meaning far beyond its years. She left behind memories that continue to inspire gentleness and understanding. Her light did not fade with her passing. It remains in the lives she touched and the hearts she opened. And as her story comes to rest, it does so with love, with gratitude, with remembrance. Michaela "Mickey" Lee will be remembered not for how long she lived, but for how deeply she lived and for the courage it took to be fully, beautifully real.